Varjak Poor, Chapter 4. The moment the grown-ups had left the room, Julius turned to Varjak. "I know why the Contessa's not here," he said, digging a claw into the toy mouse. "It's because she can't stand to look at Varjak's eyes." Jasmine, Jay, Jethro and Jerome all stood by Julius' side. No one stood by Varjak's side. He was alone, boxed in by the Contessa's empty armchair. Poor Varjak," said Cousin Jasmine, but she was smiling to feel some kind of joke. "Why do you always pick on him? I'm sure he'd rather have green eyes like everyone else." "Because they're different," said Jay. "The colour of danger," added Jethro. "He's not one of us," concluded Jerome. Varjak ignored them. He didn't even look at them, staring instead into the fire. "The Contessa's not here because she's probably dead. Didn't you hear the elder boy?" "That's enough, insect," snapped Julius. "No one asked you, and how dare you speak in family council? You're a disgrace to the name of Jalal." Julius's tail thudded menacingly on the rug, very slowly. Varjak looked up and met his big brother's eyes. His own tail started to thud. "Is that supposed to scare me?" sneered Julius. He towered over Varjak. His claws came out. So did Varjak's. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" Jay, Jethro and Jerome crowded around the two of them. Jasmine watched, grooming her fine silver blue fur. Varjak shook inside, but he didn't show it. Didn't back off. He'd never had a real fight, and he knew he didn't stand a chance against Julius. But it was as if something inside him was rising up. Something old and strong, burying deep. What did Julius think he was? "Julius, darling, he's only a kitten," cooed Jasmine in a milk-in-the-morning voice. "He's not even a proper Mesopotamian blue," said Julius. He stared at Varjak with devastating green eyes. His pupils with thin slits of scorn, mocking, challenging, daring Varjak to move first. Varjak couldn't even hold the gaze. He was too strong, too sure of himself. Whatever it was, they had risen up with him. Had gone. He turned away and back down. It was over. Julius had beaten him with just one look, as father had beaten the elder poor. In the fireplace, the flame sputtered and died. "You're the cause of all this trouble, said Julius. "Apologize for what you've done." "I'm sorry," croaked Varjak. The words were like hot coals in his mouth. "And don't ever do it again, or I'll break every bone in your body." Varjak sloped away from the front room, humiliation scorching his cheeks. A disgrace to the name of Jalal. That hurt the most. He didn't care what Julius thought, but Varjak had always felt close to his ancestor. He always loved the tales. He couldn't bear the thought of being a disgrace to him. "You wait," he said to an imaginary Julius in his head. "You just wait. One day I'll show you." There was no one in the hallway. It didn't matter if he was caught going out into the garden now. Things could hardly get worse. Varjak went up to the back door and nudged the flap open and slid silently out. The garden was a dark, gloomy place full of gnarled old trees. They had bent back on themselves. Two grown inwards and locked together, making a tangled net of knotted wood. It was hard to see the sky between them, through them. Beyond the trees lay the stone wall that enclosed the Contessa's house and garden. It was so high that no one in the family could imagine climbing it. Even Varjak, who could sometimes make it halfway up a curtain before mother or father shouted him down. He strangled in the cold night air, peered at the massive wall, the tangled branches, not poor Varjak, the tangled branches, and thought he could see a thin white whisker of moon up there, far, far above. "Varjak," It was the elder Paul. He was on his own at the bottom of the garden, by the crumbling roots of a dying tree. Varjak padded over to him. Varjak padded over to him and saw the elder Paul. He said, "It's mine." He said, "It's all my fault. Everything that happened, but it's true about the black cats. I swear on the name of Jalal, it's true." His grandfather smiled sadly. "I know that," he replied. "And it's not your fault, not a bit of it. It's them. They don't even want to think anymore." They sat in silence together in the shadow of the wall. Are you still going to tell me the tale of Jalal's greatest battle?" said Varjak after a while. "Against Sally of the North? Not tonight," said the elder boy. "I'm afraid there are more important things to tell you first. You're still young, but I don't think we have much time, and you're the only one who will understand." Varjak's skin tingled beneath his fur. Even after what had happened in the council, he was thrilled by his grandfather's words. "I'm ready," he said. "Then listen carefully. Jalal only knows what this gentleman's up to. But with the Contessa's gone, it's more than we can manage. We have to help. We have to get help from outside." Isn't the world outside full of monsters?" said Varjak. "A monster is exactly what we need. A monster called a dog. The tales say they're huge and strong, enough to get a man. Dogs fill the heart with fear, with their foul breath and deafening sound. Their tales also say Jalal could talk to them. So there must be a way to get help to scare this man away." "Mother and father say the tales aren't true. They say they're only stories." "They say they're only stories." "They're only stories?" The other Paul looked at him. "And you believe that?" Varjak shook his head. "No." "Good, because I'm telling you a family secret right now, a long one. It goes right back to the beginning." Varjak's mind raced. This was the first he'd heard about any secret. "Is it about Jalal?" he guessed. The elder Paul smiled in the dark. "It is indeed. Everyone knows the tales of Jalal. The tales of Jalal. Everyone knows tales of Jalal. But his ways are mystery, known only to you. The way of Jalal. This is something Julius and the others knew nothing about. And then the elder Paul was telling him and no one else. "The way," said the elder Paul, "has been passed down through the ages from paw to paw. Much of it has been forgotten over the years, lost and corrupted through the time. There are only fragments remain. Perhaps the way will help us talk to dogs. Perhaps I do not know it to all. I fear it won't be long enough to teach the parts I know, but it's all we have left." Varjak felt strangely disappointed. Now he knew there was a family secret. He wanted to know it all. What was the point of a secret which was lost? Still, something was better than nothing. Tell me more, elder Paul." "Come closer." Varjak bent towards him. Closer. He leaned right over so his ears was by the elder Paul's mouth. "There were 7 skills in the way of Jalal," whispered the elder Paul. His breath was warm in the cold night air. "We know only 3 of them. Their names are these: slow time, moving circles, shadow walking." He repeated the skills slowly in rhythm like poetry. "Learn these words and pass them on in time. Slow time, said Varjak. Moving circles, shadow walking." He rolled the words over his tongue with a new taste. Again, slow time, moving circles, shadow walking. His fur pricked at the shredded sounds. "Never forget this. Keep the way alive." Varjak nodded. The words, Jalal's words, were safe in his head. He would always remember them. Click. The back door swung open. Varjak and the elder Paul looked round. The gentleman was standing there, and his shiny black shoes there were 2 sleek black cats. Right, everyone. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening to this. Varjak Paul. The temperature seemed to drop. Varjak shivered. I don't like this one. one. I don't like this, whispered the elder boy. I don't like it one bit. The gentleman pointed down at them across the garden. He crouched down to touch the collars on the black cats' necks and whispered something into their ears. Then he turned and went back inside, leaving Varjak and the elder boy alone with his cats. Varjak's throat brushed out with fear as the cats came slowly but deliberately across the grass towards them. There was something so strange, so menacing about the way they moved. So menacing about the way they moved. Who are you? They didn't answer. They just kept coming. Varjak and his grandfather backed away, but there wasn't far to go. In a few steps, they were up against the wall, as far from the house as they could get. Varjak's pulse was racing. He remembered how the gentleman's cats had pushed him aside so easily. It looked like nothing in the world could stop them now. He scratched at his collar. It felt tight around his neck. Varjak, said the elder boy urgently, but without a hint of worry in his voice. I think someone as brave as you could climb that wall and go outside, don't you? Varjak glanced up. The stone was concealed by moss, but there was no height in the wall's height. It was massive. Don't worry, said the elder boy. You'll have time. I'll see to that. I'll have time? Varjak had swam. What was the elder boy saying? But he should go outside on it. That he should go outside on his own. But can't we both? No, he can't. Only one of us can get out. I'll keep them busy. You must go outside and find a dog. You're not going to fight them, are you? Dale. The elder boy took a pace towards the black cat. In his eyes was a fire Varjak had never seen before. Go! Bring back this thing that even men are scared of, and keep the way alive, Varjak poor. The cats had stopped. They were looking at the elder boy as if they were waiting for him. The elder boy growled at them. Varjak's head hurt. He was being torn apart by 1,000 different feelings. The elder boy strolled forward to meet the gentleman's cat. Tail held high, green eyes blazing. Go, Varjak, before it's too late. Don't look back. This is the only way. He looked fierce and magnificent. A tired old cat of the council was gone. Now he was the son of Jalal, facing his enemy, proud and powerful. A Mesopotamian blue. Go! He yelled and hurled himself at the black cats. They nodded as he came, as if it was all too easy. The elder paw came for him, but then he seemed to shimmer for a moment through the gap between them and came out on the other side. The two black cats ran around. The elder boy was just out of their reach. They glanced at each other and went after him. Varjak's hand thumped in his throat. His grandfather was leading them away, through the trees, back towards the house. He was taking them further and further from Varjak with quick wits and cunning, a flash of silver blue. The black cats were faster. They moved together perfectly. Each one looked sleek and lethal. How could the elder boy fight two together? Already he was slowing down, still proud, but old and short of breath. And the black cats were closing in, one on each side. They'd catch him soon, even if they didn't. What could he do against a gentleman 10 times his size? What could any cat do, or even the whole family? The elder boy was right. The only chance was to find a dog. His grandfather was doing what he had to. Now it was all up to Varjak. His mind on fire, Varjak tore his eyes from the gun and turned to the wall. It separated the world that he knew from outside. No, Paul had known that wall since Varjak himself came from Mesopotamia, but it was the only way out. He took a deep breath, coiled his body, one last glance over his shoulder. No! The black cats had caught the elder boy. They had him backed against the house. They came at him from both sides. He slashed out, but together they swarmed down on top of him and forced him to the ground. There was a terrible howl. The black cats came away, shaking their heads, and the elder paw looked limp, like a broken toy. There was a roaring in Varjak's ears. His stomach churned. Everything inside him screamed at him to stay to fight. To help the only cat who'd ever understood him. But the elder paw's words echoed in his mind. Go, before it's too late. He turned to the wall. 3, 2, 1. Varjak exploded into motion. Black cats uncoiled. Front paws reached out from a grip. Found it. Black back legs pushed, pumped power up like the wind. Varjak paw flew up the face of the wall, up through the trees, higher than the curtains, higher than the house, up, beginning to tire. Muscles aching, vision blurring. How much further? Up, grip after grip. Paw over paw, slipping. Latched onto a ledge. Heaved and made it to the top of the wall. Outside, for the first time since Jalal, a paw stood on the edge of the world. Chapter 6. Varjak could see for miles and miles. There were no walls or trees to block his view anymore. Just open space, rippling ahead of him. There's open space rippling out ahead of him. Beneath him, above him. He was standing in space, and it was a long way to fall. He peered down the inside of the wall. He could see nothing through the trees. The gentleman's cats. He could see nothing through the trees. The gentleman's cats and the elder paw were hidden by the tangled net of branches. There's no way back. He was truly on his own. Had he done the right thing? Shouldn't he have helped his grandfather? He couldn't get the picture out of his mind. The elder paw, limp like a broken toy. Tremors were coming up from somewhere deep within him, racking him open. Varjak blocked them, stopped them, pushed them back down. The elder paw knew what he was doing. He'd planned it. He was willing to lay down his life, so Varjak could have the chance to go outside and find a dog. All he had to do was go on, but where? Ahead of him was a sea of light, stretching far away into the darkness. Varjak couldn't tell what they were, where they led. He looked up. Another sea of lights. The moon and stars were cold and distant. They made him giddy in the pit of his stomach, so dizzy that he could almost feel the wall slip out from under him. He closed his eyes and counted to 10. It didn't work. The view was too big. He was too small. A purebred Mesopotamian blue had no place at the top of the wall. But then his family said he wasn't much of a blue, so who was he? Beneath the giant sky, he was no one. He was nothing. Varjak's stomach lurched. He was going to be sick if he stayed on the wall any longer. Dawn. He had to get down. He got to get down, and quickly. The black cats would be looking for him. But how? He couldn't climb down the wall. It was sheer. He'd overbalanced and crashed if he tried. There was a tree outside the wall, just one. He could climb down a tree if he could only make it that far. He stretched out a paw. His pads zipped on the wet moss that cloaked the stone. He clung on with his claws and regained his balance. A blast of bittery cold wind almost pushed him over the edge. Another wave of giddiness washed over him. The wind seemed to taunt him with a song. Too high, too high. It sang. Too high, too soon. Varjak tried to shut it out, but the song was everywhere. You've gone too high, too soon. You'll never make it to that tree. He ignored it, positioned his tail for extra balance, and took another step along the mossy. It was like walking on ice, treacherous, impossible. In his mind, he saw himself skid off that wall, smashed to pieces on the ground below. He shuddered. Think of something else, he told himself. Think of the way. Was it slow time? Moving circles? Shadow walking? Varjak glanced. Varjak staggered to a tree, staggered towards the tree. Too high, whistled the wind. Slow time, he yelled back. He wasn't going to let the wind beat him. Moving circles. He wasn't going to let the wall beat him. Shadow walking, because he was Varjak and he knew the way. Varjak walked the wall like he'd been walking walls all his life. He was light and springy on his paws. It worked. The way actually worked. He wasn't dizzy anymore. He didn't feel sick. I'd like to see Julius do this, he thought. Now he just had to step into the tree, and he could climb down easily. He done the hard part. Varjak grinned and pounced onto the nearest branch. Whack! Falling didn't test it. Stupid. The wind whipped into his face as he fell forward as he fell towards the ground. He closed his eyes and everything went black. Chapter 7. Varjak dreamed. He dreamed he was walking by a river in the heat of the night. Zigzag trees swayed in the warm breeze. The air smelled like cinnamon and tasted of ripe dates. He looked up. The stars were different. They sparkled big and bright in a brilliant sky. An old cat with silver blue fur like starlight walked beside him. He looked like Mesopotamian blue, but he wore no collar, and his eyes were amber like the rising sun. Welcome to the land of your ancestors, said the old cat. Welcome to Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia? Where Jalal came from? Jalal the poor, yes indeed. This was his home in olden days. Varjak's pulse beat a little faster. Did you know Jalal? He said. And if I did, then I'd ask you questions. Are the tales true? Could he really talk to dogs? And what would he think of me? The old cat cackled. What a question. Why should that matter to you? Varjak looked away. My family said I'm a disgrace to the name of Jalal. They said I'm not a proper purebred Mesopotamian blue. Oh, and what say you? And are you worthy of your ancestors or not? No, said Varjak quietly. He hung his head. I'm not. What if you knew the secret way of Jalal? Would you then be a proper purebred Mesopotamian blue? Varjak smiled sadly, remembering the elder pool. I already know the way. And I feel just the same. and I feel just the same. You know the way? How impressive. Perhaps you will demonstrate. Strike me! The old cat stopped walking. He blocked Varjak's path. He wasn't big, but something about him looked dangerous. Varjak stepped back a pace. Strike me! He commanded. He commanded again. His amber eyes flashed. Strike me now, or die where you stand. Well, if that was what he wanted, why not? Varjak swiped gently at the mad old cat, meaning to tap him on the side, but somehow he didn't connect. His paw sailed through the air and thudded harmlessly on the ground. Varjak frowned. How could he have missed? The old cat combed his whiskers. Am I too quick for you? He challenged. Is this the way of Jalal? I don't think you know nothing, little kitten. Strike me again! This was becoming annoying. Now Varjak wanted to hit him. Hit him hard! He decided to give it his best shot. There was no way he could miss. He slammed out a silver blue paw, missed completely and lost his balance. Those alien stars twinkled at him with silent laughter. As he rolled onto the riverbank, he sprang up again, furious. Once more! Gradually the old cat found frustration boiled over. He lashed out. His paw flapped stupidly in space, and he toppled to the ground. He kicked with his back legs, but he was fighting himself now, and he knew it. He was beaten. His elderly opponent peered down at him. I thought the first attack rather half-hearted, he said, as if they were having a friendly chat about the weather. The third was crude and clumsy, as you know. The second showed potential, yes, but it was slow, terribly slow. Still, you have a spirit. If you wish to learn the true way, only ask, and I will teach you. Varjak couldn't speak. The words stuck in his throat. He felt ashamed and embarrassed. It was obvious that this old cat knew far more than he did. The way that him, but he couldn't bring himself to admit it. His pride wouldn't allow it. The old cat shrugged. Farewell, then. He began to walk away. Something shifted inside Varjak like a locked door opening. Wait! He called. The old cat turned about. His body shimmered in a warm breeze. Don't go, said Varjak. I want to learn the way. The old cat smiled. Very well, then. I shall teach you. We begin now, he cleared his throat. There are 7 skills in the way of Jalal. First of these is open mind, and you have just found its secret, for only when you admit you know nothing can you truly know anything. Varjak's eyes widened as the words sank in. Who are you? Do you still not know me, son? Jalal? Jalal the poor that I am. He winked. Believe none of the tales. Chapter 8. Varjak awoke at the foot of the wall. His head was pounding, his paws aching. It wasn't quite light yet, but the night was almost over. The fall from the tree must have knocked him out. What a dream! He wondered if he'd have anything like it. If he would have anything like it. He shivered. It was cold out in the open, and the grass beneath his body was wet. He stood up, shook the moisture from his fur and looked round. The view cleared his head instantly. Outside was like nothing he'd seen or even dreamed of. The Contessa's house stood on top of a high hill. Beneath it was a broad green park. Beyond it, away in the distance, was a city. Stretched out under the open sky, shining like silver in the pre-dawn light. The city was a huge, mad jumble of shapes and sizes. It had tall towers, gleaming steel and glass. But Also, squat brick houses, dark with chimney, smoke, wide open gardens jostled with narrow alleys. Sharp pointed spires, topped soft, curved domes, concrete blocks loomed over bright painted billboards. They were all in there together, side by side, each one part of the whole. There was so much he couldn't take it in. All he could hear from here was the wind rustling through the treetops. But down in the city it looked noisy and bustling, a place that never went to sleep. His whiskers twitched with a mix of energy, excitement, danger. His heart beat faster. Just looking at it, it seemed like a city where anything could happen. And probably did. You could do whatever you like, and no one would stop you. Where you'd be able to find everything you wanted, even a dog. The terror of the night before the fight with the gentleman's cat. It seemed a long time ago. And very far away there was a sadness in his heart for the other poor. Deep sadness, but his grandfather had trusted him with a mission. It was his duty as a Blue to save the family, and Varjak intended to see it through. He ventured down the hill. It was steeper than it looked, and soon he found himself running, almost rolling down the slope. But it was joy to stretch out in the open. A splash of sunshine lit the horizon. He'd never seen a sunrise before, and the sky outside was alive with streaks of amber light. The sky flashed past his eyes as he sped up, sprinted to the bottom. He bounded over a fence at the foot of the hill and into the park. Around this time, back in the Contessa's house, the family would be waking up and licking each other clean. Varjak grinned. He hated washing, and already there was a satisfying build-up of mud between his claws. Next, the family would obediently munch their food out of china bowls. It would be the gentleman's vile-smelling caviar today. But now that he was outside, he wouldn't have to eat anything he didn't like. He would choose to eat and when to eat. After eating, the family would go to their litter trays. Ha! Ha! Varjak crouched by a tree. No litter tray for him today. It felt good. It felt natural. It felt he thought like it ought to feel. This was how it would be in the future. It was going to be the best time of his life. He'd return from the city with a dog, whatever a dog was, and defeat the gentleman and his strange black cats. Then he'd lead his family out of that stuffy old house into this wonderful new house out in the new world. They'd all say he was a proper Mesopotamian Blue, a true son of Jalal. They'd offer him every kind of honor and reward, and he'd turn them down. I did it for the glory of the family, he'd say humbly, and they would cheer him even more. Varjak walked further and further in the happy days. He barely noticed the fierce shades of sunrise burn out, leaving a colour. He burned out, leaving a sky a colour of ashes, a colour of cold ashes. A violent sound cut through his thoughts. A violent thought cut through his bones. A violent thought cut through his bones. A violent one cut through. was like a shrieking sound, shrieking and roaring at the same time, and it scared him. It came from a black road that was circled the park in the distance. He kept towards it, ears pressed against the skull, and then he saw them. It was a column of fearsome monsters. They were rolling down the road, roaring at each other and everything around them. Huge monsters made of metal with sharp edges all around. They had yellow eyes at the front and red eyes at the back. They moved on brown, black wheels that moved so quickly. That turned so fast it made Varjak dizzy and belched a trail of choking smoke behind them on the wind. Look at these bee dogs. What were the other words? These monsters were big enough to kill a man. Their breath was foul, their sound was deafening, and they filled his heart with fear. This was it. He was sure they were dogs. He found them. A hard, tight ball of terror formed in Varjak's stomach. How was he supposed to talk to these monsters? They didn't look as if they'd stop for anyone, let alone a kitten. As he edged closer to the possession of the metal beast, all his happy thoughts about the future faded like a false sunrise. Slow time. Moving circles. Shadow work. He shook his head. How were those words supposed to help? Why had the Audible trusted him with such an impossible mission? Why hadn't he chosen someone older and stronger like Julius? Julius might know what to do with a dog. Varjak did not. The quest was too hard. It was impossible. The ball of terror in his stomach turned into a heavy lump of despair. A droop of rain splattered on his shoulders. Varjak grimaced. He hated the water on his fur. At home, he would rush in through the cat door as soon as the weather changed. If only he could do that now. He glanced at the high hill behind him. He couldn't see the house from here. A gust of wind sliced across his face. The sky darkened. A storm was coming. He could feel it. Shelter. That was what he needed. Once he was safe from the storm, he could think about the dogs. But there was no shelter in this place. There was no shelter in this place. The sky darkened, the wind cut through his coat. I could see each blade of grass, each fallen leaf trembling alone. He had to find a little before the storm shelter. He had to find shelter, and fast. Rain came down from the darkening sky. Thick, wet rain that dripped into his fur, weighing him down with water. He tried to shake it off, but once it started, the rain kept coming. His family were right outside, with no place for a cat. There was no place at all. In the distance, behind the naked, shivering trees, he glimpsed something that he'd missed before. A small wooden hut. A shelter. He fought his way towards it. The rain whipped into his eyes. The wind pushed him back one step. For every two he took, the ground was turning into a churning sea of mud. His paws slipped and sloshed wildly. Splash! Varjak fell into a pool of oozing mud. Dark, dirty water seeping out of his mouth. He was covered in brown and green slime. Green slime. He could feel it squelching all around him, soaking into his skin. The wind howled at him like a wounded animal. It howled. You've gone too far. A claw of white light slashed the belly of the sky. There was a moment of horrible silence, and then the earth juddered with thunder shaken beneath him as if it would break in two. Help me, Jello! He cried, but only the sky answered, bellowing again with angry thunder, making him wish he hadn't spoken. Varjak wiped the slime from his eyes and dragged himself to the hut. It smelled of soggy timber and had no windows, only a door. The door was closed. He pushed. It moved, but only a crack. Desperate, he flung himself at the flimsy wood that stood between him and shelter from the storm. And the door swung open. Chapter 9. It was dark as midnight in the hut. It felt close and damp. It felt close and damp, but at least inside was drier than outside. Varjak was safe at last. He relaxed, and then a low growl ripped the air. The door slammed shut behind him. Don't move a muscle, said a gravely voice. You're surrounded. Varjak's claws slid out, ready to fight. Put those claws away, commanded the voice. Varjak opened his eyes wide. It was another cat. She had spiky black and white fur and mustard-colour eyes. She looked about the same age as him, younger than Jasmine or Julius, but harder, as if she'd seen too much of the world already. I'm not looking for a fight, she said, but if you don't put those claws away, I'll rip you to shreds. Something in her gravely voice left Varjak in no doubt that she meant it. I'm not looking for a fight either, he said, and put away his claws. The rain thudded on the roof of the hut like a nervous heartbeat. Okay, she said. This is my hut, my shelter. Everyone knows that. What are you doing here? Varjak glanced at the door. It's raining, and this was the only shelter I could find. Can't you see it's taken? She growled. Isn't it big for both of us? There's only room for one. That certainly wasn't true. But Varjak didn't think she'd appreciate him saying it. He stared silently at the soggy timber floor. A puddle had formed around him. He couldn't face going out again. Besides, she was the only cat he'd met since leaving home. She was the only cat he'd met since leaving home. She was nothing like a Mesopotamian blue, and she wasn't like the gentleman's cats either. There was nothing strange or scary about her. Though you would want her for an enemy. Varjak tried to smile through the dark at her. She glared back. What's your name? She said gruffly. I haven't seen you around here before. I'm Varjak Poor. Varjak Poor, she said. Varjak Poor? What kind of name is that? What's wrong with his name? What's yours? None of your business. Whose gang are you with? Who's your boss? Are you running from the vanishings? Varjak hesitated. What did all these questions mean? He didn't know. But he had to say something. He blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. Something he didn't even believe himself. I'm a purebred Mesopotamian blue. Oh, what? A Mesopotamian blue. Very rare. Special cats. Special? she spluttered. "I don't care how purebred you are or where you think you come from. The only thing that counts is what you do." A blast of thunder rattled the hut. Varjak frowned. He'd never heard anyone talk like that before. "What kind of cat are you?" he asked. "I'm asking questions, special cat," she said. She sounded disgusted. "Now tell me, what do you really do? Are you one of Ginger's gangs? Or are you with, say, Bones?" "Keep talking. That was the best thing." "I told you I'm a Mesopotamian blue. We live on a hill." She sighed and tapped her claws on the floor. "Everyone knows there's no food up there. Even the gangs don't bother with it. Come on, tell the truth. You must be with a gang or a little cat like you'd be starving by now." Her words sent a shiver down Varjak's spine. How could she not know about the Contessa's house? This world outside of the world he came from seemed completely cut off from each other. "Listen," she said. "If you're so high and mighty, how come you're out in the park in a storm?" "I'm outside because I need to talk to a dog," he said. She stared at him as if she didn't understand. "Dogs are huge, noisy monsters," he explained. "I know what a dog is," she snapped. Then maybe she could help. "Do you know how to talk to them?" She scowled like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I know it sounds strange," said Varjak, "but I've got to do it to save my family. They're in a lot of danger." The black and white cat laughed out loud. "He thinks he can talk to a dog?" Even her laugh sounded like the crunch of gravel. Varjak scratched an itch under his collar. It felt uncomfortable. "What's that you're scratching?" she said. "My collar." "Collar?" A strange expression crossed her face. Then she seemed to relax. "Isn't that what pets wear?" Varjak peered down at her own neck. She wore no collar. "Yes, it makes sense," she said. "You're just a pet cat who got lost in a storm, aren't you? You're not in a gang. You don't know about the vanishings. You don't know anything about the city at all, do you?" Varjak almost denied it. Then he remembered his dream. Open mind, the first skill. Only when you admit that you know nothing can you truly know anything. "All I know is that I need your help," he said quietly. "I need a place to stay until the storm's over, and then I've got to find a dog." She looked into his eyes for a long time. The rain beat down relentlessly. "All right, pet cat," she said at last. "You can stay just until the rain stops, and then you go. Understand?" Varjak smiled. Thanks. "You can't talk to me about dogs, that's all," she muttered. They sat together in the darkness. Varjak was bursting with questions. Were there many other cats outside? What were these gangs and vanishings she kept talking about? And how exactly did you talk to a dog? There were so many questions. There were so many new things to understand. But the black and white cat was curled up into a spiky ball, and more words would breach the invisible barrier she'd made between them. The rain went on. Varjak shivered. He was cold and tired. His eyelids drooped. He tried to force them open, but they kept closing by themselves. It would be madness to fall asleep in a strange place with a strange cat, but he couldn't help it. He slept in the corner of the hut, still shivering as the rainwater and slime dripped from his muddy fur. Chapter 10. Varjak dreamed. He dreamed he was back in Mesopotamia. Zigzag trees swayed in the warm night breeze. The sky was bright with stars. The air smelled like cinnamon and tasted of ripe dates. Jalal walked beside him. "How can you teach me to talk to dogs, Jalal?" What kind of trees are these?" said the old cat abruptly. "Trees all around us. There are trees. Perhaps you have noticed." "Zigzag trees?" Varjak nodded. So what kind of trees are they, Varjak Paul? Varjak bit his tongue. Jalal wasn't talking about dogs. Varjak had no idea about the trees. He didn't want to disappoint his ancestors, but what else could he do? I don't know, he admitted. Jalal stopped walking and placed his paw squarely on the earth. Awareness, he said. The second skill. If you are to survive in the world, you must be aware of everything in it. Whether you are dealing with it, assuming whether you need to find food, fight an enemy, find food, fight an enemy, or even talk to a dog. Before you do anything, you must know what you are dealing with. Assume nothing. Be sure of the facts. Open your senses. Spread them wide like a net. Observe the world, what it looks like, what it sounds like, even what it tastes like. The air tastes of dates, suggested Varjak. It does indeed. That is because these trees are date palms. See the zigzag patterns in the trunk. That is how to recognize a date. That is how to recognize a date palm tree. Jalal pointed out the other trees on the river bank. He gave names to the trees and taught Varjak how to recognize them by patterns on their trunks and the scents of their fruits. Varjak stored the knowledge carefully in his mind, and they stood under the palms practicing awareness for a timeless time. Again! Or Jalal always said. He was a stern teacher. Again! And then at last, enough. I never knew there was so much in the world, said Varjak. This is because until now, you've only used a small part of your potential. The rest is locked within you. But you are capable of anything, my son, and anything at all. Each sense is like a fine web that goes out into the world. Your whiskers can detect the slightest change. Your whiskers can detect the slightest changes in the air, the smallest movements. Your nose can scent fear. Once developed, your awareness can even feel danger and tell you when you are being watched. Jalal's ears suddenly pricked up. He dropped into a low crouch. Listen, can you hear it? Varjak listened to the peaceful Mesopotamian night. He could hear nothing usual. Pay attention, said Jalal near the top of the range. There was a scratching, squeaking, chirping noise. It came from the edge of the water. Can you hear it now? Varjak closed his eyes and concentrated. There it was, just as Jalal says. I hear it. What is it? Breakfast, said Jalal. Chapter 11. Hey, Varjak heard the gravely voice as if from a great distance. Hey, you poor Jack, whatever your name is, wake up. He opened his eyes. Once again, the dream was over. He was back in a soggy timber hut in the middle of the park. He was cold, wet and hungry. Did you say something about breakfast? He groaned. He heaved himself up and scratched his ear. A trail of dirty water trickled out. Breakfast, said another voice. Varjak looked to the door. It was open. A comfortable-looking cat with shaggy chocolate brown fur sat there. I haven't heard that word for a long time, she said. Remember breakfast, Holly? The spiky black and white cat called Holly shook her head. Did you find anything? Not a sausage, but looks like you have. The new cat winked at Alex. Where'd you dig him up? Mind your own business, said Holly. She turned to Varjak. The storm's over. It's time to go. She peered through the door. It was night again. It looked freezing out there. He had a memory flash, the sky blowing with thunder. He couldn't stand to be so alone so soon. "Have a heart, Holly," said the chocolate brown cat. "Look at him. He's obviously not dangerous." He smiled at Varjak. "My name's Tam. Don't you mind Holly here? She's in a bad mood right now but her bark's worse than her bite." "That's enough!" snapped Holly. Varjak looked into her eyes. They were sharp, mustard-coloured. "So are you going to help me find a dog?" he asked. "A dog?" Her eyes were wide and round like saucers. "Why?" "I need to talk to one." Talk to a dog," Tam whispered. "I know it's difficult." Her shaggy coat shuddered. "It's worse than that. Do you have any idea what you're saying?" Don't listen to him, Tam," said Holly. "He doesn't know anything." "Yes, I do," said Varjak. "Go on, tell Tam what your name is." He smiled. "I'm Varjak Poor," he said, with all the dignity he could muster. "I'm a noble cat. It's a noble name. I'm a Mesopotamian blue." There was a hush for a moment, and then Tam started to giggle. Holly grinned. "What?" said Tam. "Mesopotamia. It's where my family's from." "Sounds weird," said Tam. "Where is it?" Varjak scratched his head. "Don't exactly know," he admitted. "But haven't you been there?" "I only dreamed about it." They both laughed this time. The strange thing was, Varjak didn't mind. It wasn't like being bullied by Julius. These cats were so different from his family. He enjoyed the way they talked, even when they teased him. He grinned with them, and just for a moment he felt the invisible barrier between them drop. "Well then, Tam, if you're not from there, you're from here. You're one of us." "He's not from here," Holly told her. "He's a pet. Says he lives on a hill, got lost in a storm." "I'm here to say my family," said Varjak. "You are?" breathed Tam. "From who?" "Gentlemen, he's got these scary black cats. Even their eyes are black, and they walk all strange." Varjak paused. He knew he was sounding odd. "Like this," he said, and tried to walk like the black cats, but found he couldn't really do it on his own. Tam and Holly cracked up laughing again. "I like him, Tam. I like him," said Tam. "He reminds me of Luca." The warm laughter died away. The warm laughter died away. The warm laughter died away. All of a sudden, and the hut became very silent. When he looked over at Holly, there was a sad look in her eyes. "Luca's a friend of ours," said Tam. He looked like me, but he sounded like you. He could always make us laugh. Anyway, he ended up like joining a gang. It was when the food started to run out. The gangs were taking everything. We were so hungry." "I told him it was a bad idea," said Holly quietly, "but he joined one anyway. And then he vanished. Some friend." "He left you?" asked Varjak. "Not left," said Holly. "Vanished. It happens all the time in the city." She glanced at the door. Her invisible barrier was definitely up again. "But that's just what friends do. They're not worth having." "Why not?" Varjak thought he'd give anything and do anything for a friend. Nothing could be worth more. Because they let you down. They leave you in the end. It's best to be alone. "Don't worry, Varjak," said Tam. "She doesn't mean it. Holly tries to act all hard, but she's the best friend you could have. And she likes you really. I can tell. "That's enough!" "That's enough!" shouted Holly. She looked hurt. "That's enough!" shouted Holly. "That's enough!" shouted Holly. She looked hurt. "If you two are such two good friends now, why don't you just go off together?" He stalked away out of the hut into the park. She was going. Varjak followed her. He had a strange feeling like something important was slipping through his pores. "Wait," he said. Don't follow me, she growled as she padded off. Tail held up Spike in solitary, an unapproachable cat. Oh no, said Tam, hurrying after her. I shouldn't have mentioned Luca. I ruined it. Holly, wait for me. She scuttled away into the night, and Varjak Paul was alone once again. Chapter 12. Varjak walked in the other direction. He shivered as he walked. The grass felt wet and clammy cold beneath his paws. The sky was clear and clear after the storm, but it looked hollow and black, as though the rain had washed even the moon and the stars away. Moon and stars away. It was much worse being alone now that he'd had a moment with Holly and Tam. Made him realise how alone he'd been before, and how lonely he was again now. Still, he had to get on with his mission. Find a dog, take it home, beat the gentleman and his cats. The city loomed up ahead. From their hill, he'd seen it all, and how it fitted together. But on ground level, he couldn't see further than the nearest building. Even the smallest of them blocked his way. The thick brick walls reared up before him, higher than the Contessa's house. The night was full of strange sounds too. Things were rumbling, bells ringing, sirens wailing. What did it all mean? How was he going to find his way through it? He badly needed help. Holly and Tam seemed to know what they were doing, but they were gone, and they weren't coming back. Varjak walked through a gate at the park's edge. Beyond it was a narrow pavement and a wide black road lined by orange street lamps. They looked like spiny iron trees with clusters of light on their brawny branches. Instead of the sweet scent of fruit, they smelled sharp and electric, buzzing nervously above him. He felt exposed in their glare. Further down the pavement, he could hear groups of them. Some were talking, others were laughing or shouting at each other. Shouting at each other. His fur prickled. Remembering the man who had come to the Contessa's house that night, he didn't want to be seen. Not too risky out here on his own. Across the road there was a quiet-looking alleyway between the brick houses. It looked a safer place to be here. Varjak stepped onto the pavement and froze in his tracks. Before him, lined up on the edge of the road, was a column of shiny metal monsters. They stood in a single file, stock still. They weren't moving or making any sound. Their eyes were dull and lightless. Their round black wheels at rest. But they were dogs, and this was Varjak's chance to talk to them. Excuse me, he said. They didn't react, not even a flicker in their eyes. Perhaps they were sleeping. He took a deep breath and crept closer to them, ready to run if they suddenly awoke. He slunk onto the road, stretched out a paw, and gingerly touched the monster's smooth metal flank. It was cold, not asleep, but dead. Varjak shivered at the thought. Far away, but closing in. Something shrieked, something roared. Varjak's heart thudded in his chest, and he turned to face it. The shrieking, roaring noise grew louder. It was a pack of dogs, live ones, and they were coming down the road towards him. He'd forgotten how fast and wild they were. In motion they blurred beneath the streetlights. The yellow eyes were open, so round and bright they seemed to pierce his skull. He couldn't meet their gaze. He had to look away. No wonder people were scared of them. Varjak quaked as the monsters roared past, one after another. They were massive, mighty, unstoppable. In their wake came that foul, choking smell. It made him cough and cough and cough. He covered it in the lethal wind. watched the red eyes at the back recede into the distance. What should I do, Jalal? Awareness, the second skill. Before you do anything, you must know what you are dealing with. Assume nothing. Be sure of the facts. All right, the fact was these dogs wouldn't notice that if he just sat there and called out to them, they wouldn't even hear them. He had to make one of them stop. That came first. There's only one way to do it, and Varjak's stomach tightened as he realized what it meant. He was going to have to stand in front of them, in the middle of the road, as they sped towards him. Then they'd see him and would have no choice but to stop. It would take courage, but he could do it. He could do it. He was sure he could. Deep inside, something shrugged its shoulders and walked away. Absolutely not, it said. I'm not Jalal, I'm not even Julius. The dogs are never going to run to stop me. Are never going to stop. These dogs are never going to stop for me. Even if they see me, they'll just run me over. They'll kill me. Look at them, they're huge, heartless monsters. They don't slow down for anything. It's pointless even to try. But he had to try. The older Paul gave him life so he could try. Him and no one else. That sacrifice would mean nothing unless Varjak was prepared to risk his own life too. And hadn't he always wanted a chance to prove himself in proper Mesopotamian blue? Varjak closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and strode out into the road in the very centre of the dog's path. Another pair of yellow eyes appeared in the distance. He could smell the foul breath from here. He could hear the deafening roar. The terrors were right. These monsters filled his heart with fear. It clawed at his insides as they came towards him. "Stop!" he called. The eyes were big and dazzling. Varjak looked straight into them. He ignored the piercing pain they made in his head. He ignored his muscles screaming at him to run from this oncoming beast. He stood at his ground. He remembered the elder Paul in the garden, facing up to the gentleman's black cat. So brave. That was what he needed now. "Please, stop!" he shouted. "I have to talk to you." The eyes grew bigger and bigger. The monster could see others of its kind, a whole pack of them. Good. He was smack in front of them. They couldn't get past without going through him. Jalal could do this. I can do it. Monsters kept coming, and he stood his ground. Thought he had to dig his claws into the tarmac to stop himself from running. "I need your help," he yelled. "Please, please, please." But the monsters weren't slowing. They were speeding. They were shrieking. They were shrieking. Roaring. They were roaring, shrieking, but the monsters weren't slowing. They were feeding. They were shrieking, roaring, bearing down on him. Huge, deadly. Stand your ground. Stand your ground. Fur flattened. Monsters roared over his head, to his left, to his right, to his left, and were gone. Varjak stayed flat on the ground, cowering, crushing himself into the tarmac. Even though the dogs were gone, and all his hopes of saving the family with them, he crawled across the hard black road to the other side, still not daring to stand up straight. His body shook with shock. If he'd even breathed as they passed over him, they would have destroyed him. He'd come within a whisker of death. He knew that, but that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was that he failed. Chapter 13. Varjak's head hung low. He could hear more monsters in the distance, coming closer. He couldn't face looking at them. What was the point? He knew that they knew that they'd never stop and help him. Not in a million years. He'd failed to do the one and only good thing he'd ever been trusted with. What good was he to anyone? Julius was right. He was no Mesopotamian blue, and never would be. He was an insect. Worse than an insect. He was a disgrace to the name of Jalal. He'd failed. Varjak glanced up at the hill, far away on the other side of the park. Far away on the other side of the park. There was no way he could go back there, not without a dog. That meant he might never see his home again. The kitchen full of china bowls, the Contessa's red velvet armchair, even the new toy mouse, never again. He slunk into an alley that led away from the monsters, away from the hill, away from his memories of home. This alley was narrow and dark, with the shadows of night. It was empty except for a swarm of black plastic rubbish bags, so full that they split open. Ruined food seeped out of the bags, like blood from a wound. The ground was slippery with scraps, soggy bread, slimy fruit, discarded and decay in the dirt. Somewhere in the distance, almost buried by the smells, was a tang of meat. Varjak's stomach grumbled. It had been so long since he'd eaten. He remembered insisting to mother and father that he wanted a hunt, and Jalal. He laughed bitterly at the memory. It was easy to talk about hunting, but to actually do it? Him, the coward who couldn't even stop a dog. Varjak, who'd disgraced his whole family of family, a hunter, like his famous ancestor. No, an old scrap of meat was all he's good for, all he could get. Varjak followed the scent. His awareness led the most desolate place he'd ever seen. It was an enclosed courtyard. The sky was hidden here. He'd lost the moon and stars. He could see nothing but big concrete tower blocks looming all around. Every door and window was shut, as if the people inside were trying to keep something out. This place made him nervous. The blocks would be impossible to climb. Their walls were smooth and sheer. If something went wrong, if there was any trouble, he could easily be trapped. The only way out was the way he'd come in. Still, at least it was shadowy. There were plenty of places to hide, and it was quiet. All he could hear was the muffled rumbling of the city. In the distance, the smell of meat was potent in this barren place. With grim precision, Varjak tracked it to a metal bin that clanked in the corner, helpless on its side in a murky pool of rain. Something brushed against his shoulder. Varjak gasped. Ducks swung around. What was it? No one there, just a rustling sound. A plastic bag, caught by the wind, was circling him as if it was the hunter, and he was the prey. He let out his breath. He told himself not to be so nervous. He turned back to the bin. The smell of meat wasn't quite so nice. Close up, it was rancid, rotten. That's why he picked it up. He imagined life outside. If he could only have a bowl of gentleman's caviar now. But this was all he deserved. Varjak moved towards the bin, and the world erupted into violence. Out of the shadows, this perfect hiding place, 5 fully grown tomcats sprang. Not one of them wore a collar. Varjak put up his paws to defend himself, but to defend himself, they were too fast. In a vicious blur of speed, They slammed him to the ground and pinned him there. The biggest and muscly Ginger Tom towered over him. It ripped his cheek with the claws as sharp as white as lightning. Varjak howled with pain. These are our bins, Sonny, yelled the ginger. And don't forget it. Varjak wrenched the paw free and lashed back. He got the ginger full in the face. It didn't budge. It didn't flinch. It just opened the jaws and spat at him. The other cats poured down on him, a deadly rain of claws and teeth. Varjak screamed. It was agony. What do you know about the vanishings? Demanded the ginger. It was as big as the gentleman's cats. What vanishings? Gasped Varjak. Don't pretend. Don't pretend. Claws raked across Varjak's side. Bony paws pummeled his head. He clenched his bony. He clenched his eyes tight and curled into a ball. Off in the distance, he could hear a siren wailing. This was it. This was the end. He was going to die alone in this lifeless concrete place, and no one would ever know. A sense of relief washed through him. He was glad it was over. He didn't want to live anymore. He didn't deserve to live. Not after he'd Not after he'd let everyone down. Already it seemed very far away, like it was happening to someone else. His body felt cold and weightless, as if from great height. Through a curved curtain of pain, he could hear voices talking. He wondered who they were. "Leave him alone, Ginger," a gravely voice said. A gravely voice. "Well, look who it is. A friend of yours, is he, Holly? Leave him. He doesn't know anything. Ha! He'll learn." Something crunched in Varjak's ribs. Purple pain seared through his body and faded into black. Chapter 14. Down in the darkness, Varjak dreamed he was walking by the river in Mesopotamia. Date palms swayed in the warm breeze. The night air smelled of cinnamon. Jalal walked beside him. "Jalal, I thought I'd never see you again." "Why cinnamon? Why cinnamon?" said Jalal, as if he hadn't heard. "Cinnamon? Perhaps you have noticed the smell all around us. Now follow me and be silent." Jalal led him down the riverbank towards a group of men. They were sitting out around a campfire, cooking food in a sizzling pan. The most wonderful smell in the world came out of the pan. It was toasty, warm and cinnamony, and it drove Varjak wild. His nostrils twitched, his mouth drooled. He was starving. A couple of fat, sluggish cats circled the fire. One of the men tossed them something from the pan. Varjak beamed at Jalal. Obviously, they were going to join them. He was going to get some of that. Delicious-smelling food. Jalal shook his head. "Those are not true cats. They have forgotten how to hunt. They are scavengers, trapped here by their own greed. They have become slaves to the people. They might as well be dead already." Varjak blushed with shame, remembering the scrap of rancid meat he wanted so badly in the city. "But what if you're hungry and there's nothing else?" he said. Jalal's eyes blazed like amber like a rising sun. A cat is an idea of freedom, made flesh," he said fiercely. "It cannot be tied down. To be truly alive, it must be free, and a free cat hunts. It never scavenges or depends on the kindness of people. It depends only on itself." Varjak looked down. He wished it would swallow him up. "I failed, Jalal. I failed you. I failed everyone." "It's not failure to mistake, my son. What matters is whether you can learn from it." Varjak looked up. The old cat was smiling at him. It was like a ray of sunlight in the night. Like a ray of sunlight in the night. A ray of sunlight in the night. "I will learn how to hunt. I want to learn how to hunt, Jalal." "Then I shall. Then learn you shall. I will restore the knowledge that has been lost. I will teach you hunting, for it is the third skill. Now show me your awareness." Check down that chirping noise you heard when you last were here. Varjak pricked up his ears, determined not to fail. Again, the noise came from the riverbank. With his sensitive whiskers, he propped the air currents that carried the sound until he pinned its source down precisely. Crickets, he said, 4 hidden behind that clump of reeds. Correct. Jalal glided towards the reeds. Varjak marvelled at the way he moved. He was stealth itself. When you stalk your prey, whispered Jalal, you become your prey. You make it part of yourself. Breathe like it breathes. Think like it thinks. When you and the prey are at once, one, you will know its every movement, and then you will move fast. This is the secret of the third skill, and why it is done best alone. Try it. The crickets chirped on behind the long reeds as Varjak and Jalal crept up to them. Varjak selected his target. He sat stock still, waiting, watching, letting all his awareness flow out into the cricket. Every time it shifted, his senses went with it, tracking its speed, trajectory, vectors. He took it all in, as if there was nothing else in the world, as if he didn't even exist anymore. The crickets stirred. They sensed they were being watched. They were about to move. Varjak knew it with absolute certainty. His legs tensed with seal springs, tight, until the right moment came. He uncoiled into the air. Claws slid out smoothly, pinning the prey, forcing it down to the ground. He opened his jaws, prepared to sink his teeth. Enough! Enough! Jalal was shouting. Varjak released the stunned cricket. What had he done wrong? Jalal took a deep breath. It was a splendid attack. You have the third skill, but this is only practice. You are going to kill it. It's just the crickets, and we are just cats. Remember, you may cause harm only when there is no alternative. Only when your life is at stake. You take enough and no more. This is the way the world is made. I'm sorry, Jalal, said Varjak, tails between his legs. I didn't know. And why did you settle for a cricket? It wouldn't feed a mouse. No one could catch more than one at a time. Oh no, Varjak grinned. Varjak looked down at his ancestor's paws. The 3 other crickets were right there, wriggling on the ground. Now pay attention, said Jalal. This is how it is done. Goodbye everyone, and thank you for listening to this.